Hi, I'm Dan Thomas, and this is the Coastal Rainbow Forum, bringing you topics of interest from the Manatee and Sarasota, Florida, LGBT, and progressive communities. Today we have our returning champion, Steve Ryan. Steve is part of the Minnesota Attainable Housing Coalition, and he's going to give us an update on a status report on their project. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Dan, for having me back, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to start off with trying to give a little bit of history here and of how we got to where we're at now, if that sounds okay.
That sounds great.
Okay. Well, first off, a little history on me and related to, of course, my career has been all over the place in other fields, but I've always had a background in real estate. And in fact, I was just looking up the other day how many years I'd been involved in real estate investments, and it goes back a long time. And I bet you cannot probably even guess how young I was when I did my first real estate investment. You want to try to venture a guess?
Oh, I don't know. Let's say 20 years old.
You hit it right on. That's amazing. You hit it right on the nail. I was 20 years old. That is correct. It was a hobby at the time.
That was just totally a pure guess.
And that's what I figured. But interesting. I had been working. I'd worked through high school, and I was in university then. And I had saved some money, and I had come in contact with a young doctor, and this doctor had made history, incidentally. I won't go into all that, but very young doctor too, but he was extremely brilliant, and he had accomplished something that few doctors accomplish. But anyway, I won't go into that. But the point was, I met him through a social setting, and he needed some money on a piece of property he was purchasing, and at the time, by coincidence, we're looking to purchase, some other people and I, right across the road for some housing that we wanted to do together as a group. And so we talked about, and we decided to throw our lot in because he actually had a much better piece of property than what we had, and we were looking at. And that's how I got started. But anyway, it was a very successful development too, over a number of years. And I won't go back to. But anyway, and that goes back quite a few years. Then I got involved with other real estate groups over the years and represented a number of either co-owners or minority owners in multiple developments spanning a lot of years. And so anyway, and then that brings us up here to where we're at now, and when we formed the Minnesota Attainable Housing Coalition. And I was approached by several people and groups, NGOs and so forth, that wanted to do the same thing. And so we said, well, let's start working together. And that's where we've been for the past, a little over a year now. We've been working together at least a year. It could be more than that now. The time's flown by. But we've been working together, trying to put together something here in the Minnesota area. We originally had looked at this area I was with another organization then. We had looked at the Minnesota area for development, and we pulled back because we didn't have the support we needed here from certain organizations, and we ended up putting that development and went into Orlando, and it did quite well. Did not end up quite like we wanted it to, because it ended up being bought out by almost, the vast majority of it is owned by Canadians as second homes down here. And still, it worked out for us as far as the investor point of view goes, but for the point of wanting to be attainable housing, which it was, only about, 20 or 30% of it ended up that way. But that's another story. So anyway, let's go back to where we're at now. And we absorbed a client base in MAC here, and once we officially file our papers, I guess, we can officially say that we absorbed the client base of another organization in this area that, those are elderly people. Most of them are elderly, and they are mostly in the LGBT community and some of associated groups as well with them. But then we started looking, and we decided after we made some contact with some of these other NGOs that we needed to look for a broader picture and how we could run a financial model on this. And so we went back to some of our former group that had helped support us in some of the other projects and asked them what it would take for them to financially help support us at some point in the project. And not right up front, because we wanted to pass something on the ground, of course, first and show a little bit of a track record, and which we knew they'd want that anyway. So what happened after a period of a number of months of discussion, we decided to, at the same time we were working with the MAC group here, we decided to go ahead and try to form the model on the basis of several levels, and that's what I'm going to try to discuss here today and try to explain this so people can reference this radio program, because it will be archived, and then they can understand a little easier, hopefully, if I can explain it in such a way. We're divided, the project is divided into 3 levels. Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3, and this is regards of financing. Because the Level 1 financing, where we're not even there yet, we're kind of at level 0 right now, because we don't even have the financing to reach Level 1. And that level will be reached in a couple different ways here. The people that are providing the workforce here that comes in, these come from NGOs that have unofficially worked with us here for a little while now. And also some former clients that we had here who had people that were like their caregivers and things that wanted to get into something a little bit bigger and help secure their future a little better. So that's another group. That's the caregiver group, which is totally unrelated to, except that they deal with some of the same people who are with us on the housing, the actual housing development thing here. And I need to back up just a moment here and give another baseline here. Our baseline for this project is 200 units. That's what we're running the model on, because financially it works at that level. And that's basically why we chose it. And so 200 units or above, that is the model that we're working on right now.
No, that's pretty ambitious.
Yes, we need that mass in order to hold the cost down on some essential services that we'll need to provide to the client base, and that way we can spread the cost out on a larger spectrum to be able to provide the services we need to provide. We're basing this partly, incidentally, and I want to go back even a little bit further yet here. We had this was an all LGBT facility that we developed out in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but this was totally different than what we're doing now, and that because that was luxury development, and what we're doing now is attainable housing, totally different, except that it has some of the same features that we're trying to do at a more attainable level, and we're cutting out some of the frills that that development had, and then trying to put it together in a way that it meets core housing. First off, we have a model that's called, and that we've used that other parts of the world. In fact, some of our business partners have used this. It's called SMLS, Standard Model Live Small, and it was a model they developed to provide housing in other parts of the world. Unfortunately, there's a very bad story that goes with that, where it was done very poorly. I won't go into that either, because that'd take the whole time we have here to discuss that. But what we're doing, and one of the areas that we're looking at for the baseline models is containerized housing, and there's people here in this area who've done it, not done it on the stacked units that we would be using in our models in our development, but other places in the world have.
You want to explain to the listeners what containerized housing is?
Oh yes, these are shipping containers that are brought in and then transformed into housing units, and usually they're one-time use containers. These are not old containers, although we could use those as well. But that's containerized housing. They can be 8 by 20s or 8 by 40s, something like this, and it depends on how big. And also we can put them side by side too. It could be an 8 by 20, 8 by 20 stacked side by side, and then part of the model too goes in. We can even make them different configurations where we can stack these. The beauty of those containers is that they are already structurally very sound and made for our environment here. You know, the hurricane environment and so forth. Mm-hmm. Once they're cleaned up a little bit and trimmed out a little bit in some features, and that's being done right now. There's a project another gentleman's running over here through the Manatee schools that in one of the high schools, and it's a program to teach young people a trade skill that they could possibly use, and also at the same time, hopefully, they hope to provide some housing for some of the homeless students that we have here in the Manatee area and Minnesota area. I'm sorry, the Minnesota area, because they also plan to do this in both Manatee and Sarasota area. So that's the containers, and these are just regular shipping containers. And with a little bit of work, these can be turned into housing, and other places have used them, like for dorm housing in universities. There's places like that who use them. They've used them for actual housing for low-income areas and different areas like that. And they've stacked them together, and they can, as long as they're maintained, they can be very suitable. But there's other issues. I won't go into all that now here. But anyway, that's what containerized housing is. Okay. Now that doesn't say that say that we're not going to look at other options as well. But that's one of the models we're basing that. You started to say something. I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, I just said okay. As far as the explanation of containerized.
Okay. Well, that's the containerized housing right there. And then, but we are looking at other options too. If whatever's going to work, there's different people that we're in contact with are looking at other options. In fact, right as I speak right now, there's discussions going on by other people on the possibility of joining several of these groups together to be part of the core when MAC officially forms. And that's part of the reason we've held off too. We want to be sure we had the right resources available that this would succeed. And also, we have criteria that we need to meet for some of the funding that would be coming our way. And that's why I'm going to go back to level 1, level 2, and level 3 funding. Level 1 funding is level 0, where we're at right now kind of, is we're just trying to proof out some of the model to show that it will work. We bring in volunteers, and this is the challenge in itself, the volunteers are. The volunteers are first trained, and then the volunteers go out, and some of these are professional people. They come in, they volunteer a little bit of time, and these can be electricians, plumbers, tradesmen in carpentry and different skills. Caregivers, that's another one too. We have some nursing people involved with us. And then we have some younger people that are kind of mid-level. It's kind of like train the trainers, okay? And then they go out and they deal on the first-line basis with people who have virtually very little skills, in fact, often have challenges of their own. And then try to get them trained up so they can earn some money and then be employable and then can actually work in one of these areas that are needed to construct the housing. And that's what's being done at the schools as well. It's the same program they're doing, but we're doing it for people that are outside of school already and trying to help them. But there's a lot of challenges here. I would be remiss if I didn't say how many challenges we have. And a lot of them are on the HR front, human resources. A lot of them are that area because we're dealing with people that have challenges themselves individually and from a lot of different backgrounds and from the NGOs that we're trying to recruit people from or out of that are suitable to do the work. So with that said, I'll back up here and give some examples of what happens when people come and volunteer. First off, they come through a volunteer process. They meet one of our kind of, we call them the recruiting line people, and they interview them, talk to them a little bit, whatever. That's myself included. I do some of the interviews as well, and it depends on what skill sets they've got. And then